What if I told you there's a hidden story so powerful it was silenced for centuries, its pages burned, its truth buried, and the woman at its heart branded a liar? This is the story of Mary Magdalene, the closest disciple of Jesus Christ. She wasn't just a follower, she was the one Jesus trusted with secrets too dangerous to share with anyone else. She held secrets about the nature of reality, the illusion of the material world, and the divine power concealed within every individual, including you. The church didn't just dislike these teachings, they feared them. They feared that if people knew the truth, they would no longer need rules, hierarchies, or even priests. They feared losing their control. So, they silenced her. They twisted her story, turned her into a villain, and buried her teachings so deeply they hoped no one would ever find them. Fragments of this forbidden knowledge have survived, discovered in ancient scrolls hidden in Egyptian tombs. And now, for the first time, you're about to see what they were so desperate to hide. What were these teachings that terrified the most powerful institution in history? They weren't about temples, rules, or punishment. Jesus shared something far more profound with Mary. The material world isn't real. It's a shadow, a distraction. True reality exists in the mind and spirit, and when you understand this, you can connect directly to the divine. You don't need anyone to stand between you and God. No, this includes this is not a religious institution, nor is it a church.ot a church. You already have the power to awaken your divine nature. Mary Magdalene didn't just know the truth, she lived it. When Jesus left, she stood up as a leader, teaching the other disciples what he had shared with her. But the other disciples, especially Peter, struggled to accept her. Why? This was primarily due to her gender. Even then, the idea of a woman leading, teaching, or holding divine wisdom was too much for some to handle. They doubted her, they challenged her. And eventually, history followed their lead, erasing her importance and branding her as sinful, unworthy, and even untrustworthy. These lessons are for anyone who is willing to challenge conventional wisdom and discover the truth for themselves. Mary Magdalene wasn't just a figure in Jesus' life, she was central to his teachings. Yet, history tried to erase her importance, reducing her to a misunderstood and often vilified character. But the fragments of the Gospel of Mary Magdalene discovered in 1945 near Nag Hammadi, Egypt, tell a very different story, one of leadership, wisdom, and empowerment that transcends time. In these surviving texts, Mary isn't a quiet follower. She's a teacher, confidant, and leader, a role that stood in direct opposition to the patriarchal norms of early Christianity. This wasn't just unusual, it was revolutionary. At a time when women were silenced and excluded from religious leadership, Mary Magdalene was entrusted with teachings so profound they became a threat to those seeking to consolidate power in the growing Christian church. The Gospel fragments reveal that Jesus shared hidden knowledge with Mary, knowledge that positioned her as his spiritual successor. This wasn't a symbolic gesture, but a deliberate act of trust. In one passage, Mary comforts the disciples after Jesus' departure, stepping into a leadership role when others faltered. She teaches them about the illusory nature of the material world and the primacy of the mind, a bold philosophical framework that diverged sharply from orthodox teachings of sin, penance, and blind obedience. To understand the significance of Mary's leadership, we must consider the societal and religious context of her time. Strict gender hierarchies dominated the first century. Religious institutions rarely allowed women to teach or hold positions of authority. Early Christian texts, like the New Testament, often reinforced this, with passages instructing women to remain silent and submissive. Remember to join our community by subscribing to this channel. But Mary Magdalene defied these norms. The Gospel of Mary explicitly positions her as the recipient of esoteric knowledge, a figure capable of understanding and transmitting Jesus' most profound teachings. This challenges the patriarchal structures that later became deeply entrenched in the Christian church. The conflict over Mary's role is evident even within the texts. In one poignant scene, Peter questions her authority, asking why Jesus would entrust her, a woman, with such sacred knowledge. Mary defends herself, asserting that her teachings come directly from Jesus. Levi, another disciple, rebukes Peter's skepticism, urging the group to accept Mary's leadership. This tension reflects the larger struggle between Gnostic and Orthodox interpretations of Christianity, with Mary standing as a symbol of an inclusive, egalitarian faith. The Gospel of Mary is one of several Gnostic texts unearthed in the mid-20th century. These writings, including the Gospel of Thomas and the Gospel of Philip, present a version of Christianity centered on personal spiritual awakening rather than institutional control. They emphasize inner knowledge, or gnosis, as the path to salvation, a sharp contrast to the external rituals and hierarchies of Orthodox Christianity. Gnostics did not confine the divine to a distant male god. Instead, they embraced a duality that included both masculine and feminine aspects of the divine. Mary Magdalene's prominence in these texts reflects this balance, highlighting the sacred feminine as an integral part of spiritual understanding. However, these ideas were considered heretical as Christianity evolved into a Roman Empire-aligned institution. By the 4th century, under Emperor Constantine and the Council of Nicaea, 325 CE, the Church began formalizing its doctrine, excluding Gnostic perspectives. The Church banned texts like the Gospel of Mary, suppressed their teachings, and redefined Mary Magdalene's role to fit a patriarchal narrative. Instead of being a teacher or leader, they transformed her into a repentant sinner, using her story as a symbolic figure to uphold institutional authority. Mary Magdalene's story is not merely a remnant of the past. It serves as a catalyst for a re-evaluation of the composition of history and the selection of its authors. Her empowerment as a leader and teacher challenges centuries of exclusion and invites us to consider a more inclusive spiritual framework, one that values both feminine and masculine perspectives. The resurgence of interest in her story, sparked by the discovery of the Nag Hammadi texts, offers an opportunity to rediscover the divine feminine in spirituality. Mary's teachings remind us that leadership isn't about gender, it's about wisdom, courage, and the ability to inspire others to see beyond the surface of reality. The early Christian world was a landscape of competing ideas, where believers debated the nature of God, the role of Jesus, and the path to salvation. Central to this struggle was a profound ideological divide, the conflict between Gnosticism, with its emphasis on inner knowledge, and orthodoxy, which sought to establish a unified, institutionalized faith. This clash shaped the course of Christianity, with significant implications for figures like Mary Magdalene and the teachings associated with her. Gnosticism was more than just an alternative form of Christianity. It was a worldview that offered a fundamentally different understanding of existence. At its core was the concept of gnosis, a Greek word meaning knowledge. But this wasn't ordinary knowledge. Gnosis referred to an intuitive, experiential understanding of the divine, a personal awakening to the ultimate reality. Gnostics viewed the material world as a shadow of true reality. For them, the physical realm was often seen as flawed, even deceptive, created by a lesser divine being called the demiurge. This being, identified with the God of the Old Testament in some Gnostic traditions, was responsible for trapping souls in the material plane. Salvation, therefore, was not about following rules or rituals, but about escaping the illusion of the material world through enlightenment and self-discovery. In this framework, Jesus was not merely a savior who died for humanity's sins, but a spiritual guide who came to reveal hidden truths. Gnostic texts, such as the Gospel of Mary, present him as a teacher, imparting deep wisdom about the nature of reality and the soul's journey back to its divine origin. Orthodoxy, on the other hand, sought to create a cohesive and authoritative version of Christianity. By the 2nd and 3rd centuries, the Christian faith was growing rapidly, and with that growth came the need for structure. The Orthodox leaders placed a high priority on standardization, formulating a set of beliefs and practices that all Christians were required to adhere to. This effort culminated in councils such as the First Council of Nicaea in 325 CE, where key doctrines were formalized. Orthodox Christianity focused on external expressions of faith, sacraments, communal worship, and adherence to a codified set of rules. Orthodox Christianity viewed the material world as part of God's creation, not as an illusion, and tied humanity's purpose to living morally within it. Church teachings framed salvation as obedience and redemption through Jesus' death and resurrection. Orthodoxy emphasized a hierarchical structure with bishops, priests, and other clergy mediating between believers and the divine. This institutional approach stood in stark contrast to the Gnostic focus on individual enlightenment and direct access to spiritual truths. The Gospel of Mary illustrates this conflict vividly. In the text, Mary Magdalene emerges as a leader and teacher, conveying profound spiritual insights to the other disciples. Peter, in particular, challenges her authority, questioning why Jesus would reveal such truths to her, a woman, rather than to them. This tension is symbolic of the broader struggle between Gnosticism and Orthodoxy. Mary Magdalene, representing the Gnostic tradition, embodies the idea that enlightenment is personal, transcending gender and institutional boundaries. Peter, a cornerstone of Orthodox Christianity, reflects the institutional drive to centralize authority and maintain traditional hierarchies. The rejection of Mary Magdalene's role by figures like Peter mirrors the historical marginalization of Gnostic teachings. As the Orthodox Church gained power, it dismissed Gnostic texts and leaders, branding them as heretics. This not only suppressed alternative spiritual perspectives, but also excluded voices that championed a more inclusive and egalitarian faith. By the 4th century, the Gnostic tradition was systematically silenced. Texts like the Gospel of Mary, the Gospel of Thomas, and the Gospel of Philip were labeled heretical and excluded from the official canon of Scripture. These works emphasized self-discovery and spiritual independence, concepts that threatened the growing authority of the Orthodox Church. Are you enjoying the story? Support our channel by clicking the subscribe button. The suppression extended beyond ideas to include physical texts. The authorities burned Gnostic writings and persecuted their followers. The discovery of the Nag Hammadi Library in 1945, which included many Gnostic texts, revealed the extent of this erasure. Gnostics had concealed these texts for centuries, demonstrating the extreme measures they took to safeguard their teachings. Orthodox leaders guided the formalization of spiritual practices in the early centuries of Christianity. They built churches, established hierarchies, and standardized doctrines. The sacraments, adherence to religious laws, and participation in the church community became essential for salvation. Gnostic teachings, however, took a different approach. They contended that priests did not confine the divine to a building or mediate it. The divine was within every individual, waiting to be realized. The Gospel of Mary emphasizes this idea, with Jesus telling his disciples to seek him within themselves. This was not a rejection of community or fellowship, but a declaration that the ultimate spiritual journey was personal. Mary Magdalene's role in these teachings is significant. She is portrayed as someone who has achieved a deeper understanding of these spiritual truths, guiding others toward their own awakening. Her position as a teacher and leader underscores the Gnostic belief that authority comes from knowledge and inner realization, not external titles or positions. Gnosticism teaches that the material world is an illusion, a construct that can distract the soul from its true purpose. Salvation, in this framework, is not about following rules or earning divine favor, but about awakening to the ultimate reality. This awakening, or gnosis, is a deeply personal process that requires introspection, self-awareness, and the courage to question established beliefs. The Gospel of Mary illustrates this through its dialogue between Mary and the other disciples. The disciples face confusion and fear when Jesus departs. It is Mary who steps forward, offering insights that calm their doubts and direct them toward the path of self-discovery. Her teachings underscore the attainment of enlightenment through comprehending the mind's connection to the divine, surpassing both material and institutional limitations. This concept of spiritual independence was dangerous to Orthodox leaders. By claiming that individuals could access the divine directly, Gnosticism undermined the authority of the Church. If salvation came from within, what need was there for priests, bishops, or elaborate rituals? This threat likely contributed to the suppression of Gnostic texts and the marginalization of Mary Magdalene's role in Christian history. Mary Magdalene's prominence in the Gnostic tradition also reflects a broader theme of spiritual inclusivity. Unlike Orthodox Christianity, which largely restricted women's roles in leadership and worship, Gnostic texts often celebrated the divine feminine. Figures like Mary, Sophia, the personification of wisdom, and Eve are central to their narratives. In the Gospel of Mary, Jesus praises Mary for her spiritual insight, and her leadership is acknowledged by some of the male disciples, even as others, like Peter, resist her authority. This dynamic highlights the Gnostic perspective that spiritual wisdom transcends gender and class boundaries. It is available to all who seek it sincerely, regardless of societal conventions. This inclusion of feminine perspectives enhances the Gnostic message of independence. It suggests that true spiritual growth comes from transcending divisions and recognizing the unity of all aspects of the divine, both masculine and feminine. By centering Mary Magdalene, the Gnostic tradition presents a model of spiritual empowerment that is holistic and egalitarian. The idea that divine connection comes from within remains as relevant now as it was 2 millennia ago. In a world where organized religion often dictates morality, behavior, and even thought, the message of spiritual independence offers an alternative. It invites individuals to explore their own beliefs, question established doctrines, and seek a direct relationship with the sacred. This perspective doesn't reject community or tradition outright, but encourages a balance. Rituals and teachings can be valuable tools, but they should serve as guides rather than absolutes. True spiritual growth requires individuals to take responsibility for their own journey, drawing wisdom from both external sources and their inner experiences. Mary Magdalene's role as a spiritual leader and the knowledge she imparted were erased not because they lacked importance, but because they challenged the structures of power that sought to dominate faith. The Gnostic emphasis on direct connection to the divine and the empowerment of individuals, regardless of gender or status, was perceived as a threat to the rising Orthodox Church. Redefining Mary as a minor figure or a repentant sinner diminished her revolutionary impact and the broader message of spiritual independence. Yet her story survived. Hidden away for centuries, the rediscovered Gnostic texts remind us of the resilience of truth. These teachings, long silenced, now inspire modern seekers to reclaim their personal spiritual journeys and to question narratives that confine the divine to institutions or rituals. At the heart of Mary Magdalene's story lies a universal truth. The balance between masculine and feminine energies is essential to understanding the divine. Her prominence in Gnostic texts challenges the patriarchal framework that has shaped much of religious history. Her role as a teacher and spiritual equal reflects a vision of spirituality that values inclusivity and harmony over control and hierarchy. In a time when women were systematically excluded from positions of authority, Mary's leadership stands as a powerful testament to the potential of the divine feminine. She reminds us that everyone who seeks them earnestly can attain wisdom and enlightenment, regardless of gender or tradition. Mary's story resonates deeply in a modern world, grappling with questions of identity, inclusion, and authority. Her teachings encourage us to look inward, to trust our capacity for understanding, and to recognize that spiritual growth is not dictated by external rules, but guided by our inner truths. If this story has resonated with you, consider leaving a super thanks. Your support is making a difference, spreading this message and reminding the world that the path to enlightenment starts within. Her legacy invites us to challenge outdated systems that prioritize control over empowerment. It calls us to reclaim the lost balance between intellect and intuition, logic and emotion, masculine and feminine. These are not just spiritual principles, they are the foundations of a more just and harmonious world. Mary Magdalene's journey asks something of all of us. Will we choose to follow the prescribed path, or will we have the courage to forge our own? Her life was a testament to the power of seeking, questioning, and embracing the truths hidden beneath the surface. Through her story, we see that true enlightenment is not something bestowed by others. It is something we must discover for ourselves. As you reflect on her teachings, ask yourself, what illusions hold you back? What truths have you yet to uncover? And most importantly, how will you use your own wisdom to break free from the constraints of the world as it seems and move closer to the world as it truly is? Though silenced for centuries, Mary Magdalene's teachings never vanished. Today, her message has re-emerged, urging us to reclaim the spiritual independence and inner divinity that define who we are. Her story is not just about the past, it is about the future we have the power to create. Thanks for watching. Join our community by subscribing to this channel. Stay tuned for the upcoming video.